45 minutes from now. It is time for a check of the top business news. I'm joined by Kate Moody. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Tom.
Let's begin in the United States, where tens of thousands of workers have sadly found themselves out of a job.
Yeah, just a day after Disney announced that it was going to be cutting 28,000 jobs, American and United Airlines are beginning to lay off some 32,000 staff members. Now, federal aid for the aviation sector ran out at midnight, and with it, the condition that payroll remain intact. Congress has so far failed to agree new funding for the sector. With air traffic still about 70% below normal levels, airlines have said they have no choice but to shed jobs. That they could recall those employees if lawmakers come up with more financial support. Meanwhile, the number of Americans claiming unemployment benefits decreased slightly last week. 837,000 new claims were recorded by the Labor Department. That's 36,000 fewer than the previous week. It's still well above pre-pandemic levels. California, meanwhile, has suspended its processing of new applications by about 2 weeks to combat fraud, and that may have distorted Thursday's data. Well, earlier, I spoke to Elizabeth Crowfoot, senior economist at the Conference Board in New York, about the state of the U.S. labor market.
It's really difficult to get a good reading from the initial unemployment data right now. There are largely claims that these data have become increasingly unreliable. States are really mired by backlogs, by outdated systems, and now fraud. So it's difficult to get that full picture of the labor market. I think what's better will be to look at some of the data that's coming out tomorrow from the unemployment numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the jobs report. So that will give us a better indication of what this labor market recovery is really amounting to. It'll give us a better signal. So we are expecting, some continued job gains, but relative to what we've seen in the past, these strong numbers that we would consider strong are really going to be, it's relative to how we were performing in the past. And we do see that there is a slowing down of job gains, and we expect that going forward.
So we are seeing more jobs being added. About half of all the jobs that were lost during the lockdown have been recovered. But is this improvement that we saw in recent months plateauing, or are we likely to see a lot of people out of work really for the medium to long term here?
Right. I mean, it's interesting that we were at nearly a 15% unemployment rate in April, down to 8.4% in August. And a lot of those low-hanging fruit of job gains have already been picked over the summer. These businesses are really staying afloat because of the historic fiscal stimulus, right? Those PPP loans. Also, consumers that were benefiting from supplemental uninsurance payments, for example, those extra $600 a week, and also direct payments from the government. So they were really spurring additional consumption. Now that that fiscal aid has expired for both businesses and consumers, they're not going to be able to spend as much money, which does not bode well for businesses. They're probably going to be seeing increased pressure to, make ends meet. Many of these businesses, especially restaurants, have very small margins. They're not going to be able to continue at 90% capacity even. So they're going to have to continue to cut their payrolls in order to survive, if not completely close shop, especially as the weather turns and they're not able to continue operations, socially distant operations outdoors.
Let's check in on the day's trading action now. Wall Street's mixed this hour. The Dow Jones has turned negative. It had been trading sharply higher earlier on, but hopes for progress on Capitol Hill are now fading. Tech stocks are still leading gains. The Nasdaq up around 1% this hour. The Dow Jones only slightly above the flat line there, but it has been crossing back and forth over it recently. A mixed close for the major European indices, just the DAX closing slightly below the flat line there in Frankfurt. Bayer shares plunged 13% after the German pharmaceutical giant lowered its guidance. Unemployment across the Eurozone, meanwhile, increased slightly in August to 8.1%. In a major shift, Google has said it will pay publishers around $1 billion for news over the next 3 years. For over a decade, the tech giant has dismissed calls for it to pay publishers for new news content. Google plans to pay publishers to now create and curate content for a new mobile product called Google News Showcase. It'll initially go live in Brazil and Germany before being launched in other countries. CEO Sundar Pichai saying the internet has been the latest shift for newspapers and media, and it certainly won't be the last.